Heritage tells a powerful story. In our past episodes, we journeyed throughout the Philippines to rediscover our history through heritage. The heritage of our towns and cities, our plazas, churches, buildings and houses, the places that have sheltered us during our past, all tell different parts of our shared national story. Another aspect of heritage is our traditions. Songs, dances, clothing and cuisine that reveal to us what kind of life we lived inside those heritage places. If we are to continue remembering our national story, we have to conserve the sites where the story happened and also the traditions that were carried out within those places.
And they are remnants of colonial rule. So what is it about them that is important? That's the thing that we have to emphasize.
They keep on asking, makakain ba ang heritage? That's not the point.
I am Augusto Villalon, an architect with a passion for conserving heritage and with a fascination for Philippine history. Something that you thought would last for centuries is gone in a few seconds. During the next hour, we will look into the challenges that we must face while conserving our heritage.
You're not just tracing a line there. What you're doing is actually tracing a piece of history.
So I want those buildings protected. There's no question about that.
We will hear from government authorities, NGO leaders, and dedicated individuals who devote much time and effort to maintain and preserve many of our historical structures and landmarks.
For me, these places and structures are more valuable than anything stored in the Bangko Sentral vaults. These are our real national treasures.
We have a long story that goes far back in time, more than what ordinary Filipinos know.
Well, there's an urgent need to rewrite our own history.
The Philippines is in fact a treasure trove of cultural discovery.
Filipino culture is the wellspring of national and global well-being.
We Filipinos like to say that when World War II ended, Manila was the second most devastated city in the world after Warsaw.
This beautiful city that was created out of volcanic ash and seashells and bamboo and hardwood and clay roofs was blown up in just a mere 3 weeks back in February of 1945 by the Japanese forces and the United States Army. So we have to make clear it was both of them who destroyed the city of Manila.
And it is true, World War II reduced most of central Manila to rubble. But what Warsaw did with its damaged buildings after the war was what Manila did not do. Warsaw lovingly rebuilt its ruined historic center until it replicated, stone by stone, the original heritage structures that were lost. The Polish capital regained its identity, its image as a city, and it became recognized as one of the best international examples of restoration based on authenticity. We in Manila did the opposite. We took the rubble down, stone by stone, and wiped out heritage buildings from our historic city center. Although the monumental government buildings were reconstructed, the ordinary buildings where everyday life took place were never rebuilt. Instead, they were replaced with hurriedly constructed slapdash structures that became the norm for post-war reconstruction. This is still the norm for architecture and urban planning that has carried over to this day. We lost the pre-war image and character of Manila. we lost the identity of the city. Heritage was a victim of war that never recovered. Instead of salvaging and rebuilding, people destroyed the ruins. It is said that more heritage was lost by post-war demolition than from the war itself. Heritage was associated with negativity, a reminder of war destruction. Colonial architecture, whether Spanish or American, was also thought to be backward and old-fashioned. Many Filipinos considered heritage as anti-progress. They did not think that old towns and heritage buildings were a good thing. They preferred new over old. With a national mindset like this, it was difficult to introduce the concept of conservation. Post-war Intramuros became the symbol of how badly our heritage had been damaged.
There was a law passed soon after World War II that said that any building in Intramuros must be built consistent with Spanish architecture. And it was very broad, and the National Historical Institute was in charge of administering it. And I don't think they really ever got to decide categorically what kind of Spanish architecture. And so as long as it had an arch, it kind of passed for Spanish architecture.
Dr. Jaime Laya, one of the country's most respected heritage advocates, tells of the initial efforts at rebuilding the historic walled city.
Mrs. Marcos started it with the then Secretary Alejandro Roses. They fixed up some of the gates. Anyway, about 1978, I happened to be passing by Intramuros, and I noticed the Palacio del Gobernador building was rising. This is the one on Plaza de Roma, and it was being built by the Land Bank as a condominium. And I realized that, wow, this was really going to spoil the ambience not only of the plaza itself, but of the entire Intramuros. And so I called the attention of President Marcos, and he said, stop it. And so he created the Intramuros administration. And I was one of the people who drafted the law, and it was made into a decree, which started the restoration of Intramuros.
In the mid-1980s, the heritage movement began to gather momentum, led by concerned individuals and NGOs. Two NGOs spearheaded the momentum. ICOMOS Philippines, or the National Committee of the International Council for Monuments and Sites, is the organization whose members, all heritage professionals, campaigned for the professionalization of the heritage conservation practice. They partnered with the UNESCO National Commission of the Philippines for the successful nomination of the first 5 properties for inscription in the World Heritage List. Another heritage NGO, the Heritage Conservation Society, emerged as the national voice for conservation issues. Organized by individuals passionate about heritage, the organization quickly rose to national prominence. It not only held awareness programs in various cities around the country, it also successfully lobbied for heritage protection.
The Heritage Conservation Society is an advocacy group. First and foremost, we focus on built heritage. And when we say advocacy, we talk about, number one, coming up with legislation.
In 1987, President Cory Aquino established the Presidential Commission for Culture and the Arts. In 1992, it was expanded into the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, or NCCA, with jurisdiction over all Philippine artistic and cultural development.
We're trying to make people understand, number one, what is heritage? So we try to tell them, forget about thinking that it's just for rich people. Cultural heritage tells us what makes us unique, what makes us different.
An important milestone for the heritage movement was the inscription of Philippine properties to the prestigious World Heritage List. At last, Filipinos realized that their heritage was of international value. As a result, people began to take heritage more seriously. Noticed in global World Heritage circles was the method of community-based management of World Heritage properties that evolved in the Philippines, particularly in the World Heritage city of Vigan and in the rice terraces of the Philippine Cordilleras. Both World Heritage properties have become international examples for sustainable conservation carried out by the local community in cooperation with the LGU, while receiving little or no central government support. In 2013, UNESCO recognized the Vigan method of community-based conservation by awarding the city as the most sustainable World Heritage City. But the road to international recognition and respect was not a smooth one.